Hi friends, welcome back. My name is Jessica and the topic of today's video is a book review of the book The Trials of Morrigan Crow. It's part of the Nevermore series, book 1, and it's written by Jessica Townsend. I got to wear my ugly Christmas sweater vest to work today for a virtual holiday party. So that was fun. How are y'all doing? How's your winter season going so far? Nevermore is a new series that a lot of booktubers are talking about, and if you watched my video on 2021 reading goals that I have for this channel and just for myself personally, I do want to start reading more middle grade in 2021. And you know, honestly, I'm not the kind of person that's real New Year's resolution oriented anymore. I used to be, but anymore, if there's a goal that I have set that I want to work on, I just kind of dive in and start working on it instead of waiting till the beginning of the year, if that makes sense. So I am diving in and starting to read more middle grade already. This is actually the first middle grade I've read this year in 2020, but 2021 I know I'm going to be reading a lot more middle grade because I'm definitely going to be reading the rest of this series. Look at the cover of this book. Isn't it just the cutest? I know you can't see the color in my Kindle, but the cover is just so whimsical and cute. And this giant kitty cat is my favorite character. So The Trials of Morrigan Crow is written by Jessica Townsend. It was published by Little Brown Books in 2017. It's 465 pages in length. I check this out from my library's digital collection. It's not one that I own, and it is considered a middle grade book in terms of audience, which again, like I said, is part of my middle grade reading goals. So Jessica Townsend, she is an Australian writer. This was actually her debut novel, which is pretty impressive. The book won Book of the Year award at the Australian Book Industry Awards, and film rights were actually sold to 20th Century Fox. So I'm really interested to see if anything comes of that. Let me read you the book description on Goodreads. A cursed girl escapes death and finds herself in a magical world, but is then tested beyond her wildest imagination. Morrigan Crow is cursed, having been born on Eventide, the unluckiest day for any child to be born. She is blamed for all local misfortunes, from hailstorms to heart attacks, and worst of all, the curse means that Morrigan is doomed to die at midnight on her 11th birthday. But as Morrigan awaits her fate, a strange and remarkable man named Jupiter North appears. Chased by black smoke hounds and shadowy hunters on horseback, he whisks her away into the safety of a secret magical city called Nevermore. It's then that Morrigan discovers Jupiter has chosen her to contend for a place in the city's most prestigious organization, the Wondrous Society. In order to join, she must compete in 4 difficult and dangerous trials against hundreds of other kids, each boasting an extraordinary talent that sets them apart. An extraordinary talent that Morrigan insists she does not have. To stay in the safety of Nevermore for good, Morrigan will need to find a way to pass the tests, or she'll have to leave the city to confront her deadly fate. That is a really thorough and comprehensive description of what this book is about. It pretty much sums it up for you. The trials are, to me, it felt a little bit, I know a lot of people compare this book to Harry Potter, but it did feel a little Harry Potter-esque regarding specifically, which book is it? The Goblet of Fire, like those trials that they do, because each trial is like its own magical test that the children are put through, and even if they pass all the tests, they don't automatically join the Wondrous Society. From there they have to go through further training. So this book is about Morrigan going through these different trials. I really enjoyed the Trials of Morrigan Crow. It pleasantly surprised me. I thought that the writing was definitely aimed for a middle grade audience, but also something that adults could enjoy, in that it had some pretty complex themes and more adult themes within the work, particularly around issues of immigration. This book is largely an allegory to immigration, and in particular the Dreamers Act, DACA, and even the names of the different parts of this world kind of reflect that. So if you're a resident of Nevermore, you're considered a resident of the Free State, which that's like the US, right? Land of the free. And then there are some immigration officials, and one of them in particular is pretty hateful. He uses a lot of immigration slurs, which is what you would call a content warning. The slurs are not, they're pretty aggressive. So he calls Morrigan a dirty illegal repeatedly throughout this story, because she's technically smuggled into the country without any paperwork or anything like that, or into the realm or the city or whatever you want to call it, the Free State, and she doesn't have paperwork, but she technically has protection under the Wondrous Society as she goes through the trials. And that to me just screams DACA and the Dreamer Act, where these children have protection under the Dreamer Act, even though they might have been, they might have arrived at the country through less than legal processes, so on and so forth. And I think that this book would be particularly good for children who are children of immigrants, because the way that Jessica Townsend writes out some of these scenes, they're just so intense. And you really get a good sense for Morrigan's feeling of homelessness and of not belonging here or there, right? Since she is technically undocumented. I liked Morrigan as a character. I think she's a strong lead character, and before she goes to Nevermore, she breaks your heart, because the first part of the book is about how she's expected to die at Eventide, which is around her 11th birthday. And so it's about looking ahead and her family looking ahead to life without her. And keep in mind, she's considered a cursed child, so people think that anything bad that happens in the world is Morrigan's fault, she caused it somehow. So her family is really sending a lot of messaging to her that her death will be a relief to them, and just the grief that Morrigan feels at not only having to die at a young age, but having to go through that process with a family who's basically going to celebrate her death, or at least not give it a whole lot of thought, who might not mourn her the way other parents would mourn the death of a child. And it breaks your heart. Let me see if I did highlight some quotes. Since she's a cursed child, she's experienced a lot of people disliking her and blaming her for all of their trouble. And so when she's going through one of these interviews with a potential employer for an apprenticeship, she says she could imagine it. She had imagined 100 times over how it would feel to be liked instead of feared, to see people smile instead of flinch when she walked into a room. It was one of her favorite daydreams. You feel so bad for Morrigan, and it's such a joy when Jupiter is able to whisk her off to Nevermore, and she gets to live in a space where she not only gets to live, but she gets to live in a space where she's no longer a cursed child. The scene where she realizes that she didn't die at eventide made me tear up. Let me read you the quote. I'm alive, she thought, and the idea was so absurd and so wonderful that a laugh spilled from her mouth, cutting through the quiet. Morrigan didn't care. She felt expansive, bursting with a new joy and temerity that could only come from having cheated death. It's a new age, she thought with disbelief, and I'm alive. Ah, ah, yes, you are, Morrigan. Yes, you are. So I fell in love with the characters. I liked Morrigan a lot as a lead character. I liked Jupiter. He was a pretty but my absolute favorite character in the whole book was Fenestra. And Fenestra is a giant cat, like the size of a horse. Giant cat. And Fenestra is as delightful as you can imagine a giant house cat being. Like, oh, I loved her so much. She made me laugh out loud at various points in the book, and just you imagine the behavior of a house cat only in a cat 10 times this size. Like, oh, it was so wonderful, so delightful. I would love it if Jessica Townsend made a spin-off series just about the Magnificats. So we could have Fenestra starring in her own series. Like, that would be amazing. So yes, overall I really enjoyed this book. For content warning, I would say content warnings around the death of children. Whew, so when I was growing up, I lost a friend in high school. She was 15 at the time, to cancer, and the depictions and the descriptions of Morrigan preparing for her death really triggered some of those feelings from experiencing the death of my friend when we were children. And so, you know, content warning around that, and then content warning around immigration slurs, because that one immigration officer uses slurs. Like, he just tosses them out there in a way that's almost not kid friendly, but probably kids who are immigrants or have immigrants of parents have probably already experienced. So there is that. I rated this book a 4 stars out of 5. I do plan on reading the next book in the series. If you have read this book, tell me in the comments down below who your favorite character from the story is and why. And until next time, make sure to continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!